Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.20 support tier list. So if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. The support role of this patch didn't really receive that many changes. The two main things are the fact that Luden's Companion and Storm Surge as a pairing both got nerfed. This does affect certain supports like your LeBlancs, your Zerefs, your Ziggs, your Zoes. All these did take a bit of a tag. Obviously, a lot of them do come from primarily the mid lane into the support role, so this isn't their primary role by any means, but they do support a player base here. The other one, which is a big nerf, was to Poppy. She was one of the best performing supports in the previous patch, so they tagged her a bit in both top lane and support primarily, gave her some compensation in jungle to make sure they didn't over nerf that. And other than those specific changes, we saw a buff to Pantheon with his W gaining 1% damage, which is nice. It actually does push him up a tier, which I'll talk about in a second. So the D tier is going to consist of the same characters. We have MF and Ashe, who are still both underperforming in the support role at the moment. Both these obviously primary role ADCs, but have in past had iterations which have been viable in the support role. Ashe with like Imperial Mandate utility focused variations, which just aren't really doing well anymore. She had some nerfs specifically to try and take those down a bit, combined with ADC focused nerfs, which has obviously fed into support Ashe, and her items just not being as good as they were in the past. She's lost a decent amount of power and is no longer really viable as a good support option. In MF's case, she hasn't been good as a support for a couple of years now, mostly focused around obviously her E and playing as an AP harass mage. There are just considerably better options for more consistency and less downtime. The other four champions which are going to be in the D tier are Veigar, who got nerfed this patch, obviously towards his mid lane strength. He was overperforming because the game length was a bit longer, combined with fights being less explosive with overall damage being slightly down. I helped him a bit. He lost some AP ratio on his W, and he still remains as a D tier support option. Malphite, Yuumi, and Ziggs wrap up the D tier. In Malphite's case, he's obviously a very gimmicky support. You're not really seeing him outside of pairings like Yasuo, utilizing his ultimate for like a big AoE knockup and his Q for harass and laning phase. He's kind of limited to that mostly, and isn't great as like a frontline option, as obviously you're leaning primarily into being like a AP mage when you're playing him as a support. There are tank variations, which oftentimes tank Malphite does just outperform AP Malphite generalistically if you're playing it into the correct compositions, but as a pick, he does underperform in the support role. Yumi's case, she is outright just the worst primary support at the moment. Being her main role, she should be better in my opinion, combined with the fact that she's easier. The problem with Yuumi is her frustration. Like, she's one of the most frustrating champions in the game for a lot of people, being arguably very just doesn't really fit into League of Legends as a pick, and like everyone knows that at this point. I'm kind of just telling people what they already know, but Yuumi, really underperforms at the moment, mostly viable with on-hit champions, but there are considerably better options in the current game state. And then Ziggs drops down to the D tier. I had him in the C tier for a bit because he was obviously benefiting from Luden's and Storm Surge powers as support, and honestly I'm even surprised that support Ziggs actually holds up such a player base in this role, as he does sit as like one of the bottom 10 on my list, but he's still like one of the higher out of that 10 because there is a player base for him. So Ziggs maintains a spot on my tier list, but is going to drop down to the D tier. I'm overall just not a huge fan of this pick. I feel like there's considerably better options which you can lean into, which aren't as demanding in terms of resources as Ziggs, or have harder CC options, whereas Ziggs obviously has to play around primarily his W. Ziggs Veigar is usually the common combo you see here. Moving on to the C tier, then we have Maokai, Blitzcrank, Renata, and Amumu. In Maokai's case, he's been massively nerfed just through jungle. His jungle strength in competitive has just gotten him nerfed continuously as a support. There was a brief period of time where Trailblazer Maokai was one of the best supports in the game, if not just outright the best. They nerfed it continuously because of that. They tried to give him jungle strength to make him viable there. It became dominant and competitive. They nerfed that down because of his competitive dominance, and now Maokai is just completely misplaced again. He's in a really rough spot, and I do think Maokai either needs some sort of kit adjustment or some form of just buff to really put him back into the game again. I reckon if they were to take a route with like buffing or like changing Maokai, they should probably just make him a top laner. I think that is arguably the role which is the healthiest for him, and then enable him to either be a jungler or support. I don't know how they would functionally do that without making him once again a competitive problem, but yeah, it should probably be the direction they lean in. In the case of Blitzcrank, he's actually been underperforming for a bit now. He had some nerfs directly targeted towards him because of his frustration in low elo, and then on top of this, I believe the item system just hasn't really rewarded him going into this split, and he's definitely dropped down towards the C tier at the moment, just underperforming in his current state. Amumu got hotfix nerfed on 14.19. It took a decent amount of power out of support as well, as they were flat numbers rather than towards his scaling. And overall, yeah, that's just taken a bit of a toll on Amumu. He drops down to the C tier. In Renata's case, she's very unpopular in her current state. I think the most unpopular pure support option. This pick has been pretty heavily gatekept by pro play, and then when she finally ended up in a spot where she was weak in solo queue, she never really received a compensation because of concerns of obviously like Renata Kalista pairings in competitive and just being overwhelming in that regard. Yeah, she just struggles in solo queue in her current state. The loss of things like Radiant Virtue have definitely taken its toll over time, and she does currently sit in a pretty rough spot. Moving on to the B tier then, we have Teemo, who is being buffed in 14.21, but currently still a fine support option. Obviously, you're primarily pairing him, playing him into double auto attack based lanes where you can really utilize your Q to get a lot of effectiveness out of that. He is considered obviously a troll / gimmicky pick, and most people won't want to see Teemo support, so you do have to be aware of that. I won't promote him primarily for that reason, because there are times where you will just be griefed for playing something like Teemo support, which is unfortunate, but it's currently the place where he is. Other than that, obviously he scales incredibly aggressively, and his shrooms are great control points. Karma, I'm not a huge Karma fan. This champ is incredibly predicated on getting early advantages. If you don't, this champion really falls off quite aggressively in the game. She does have a fallback pattern in the E shielding and just AoE E shields that has been buffed up over time, but she's still definitely skewed more towards getting an early advantage, moving around the map, and then using her one item spike to really like seal the deal and then get the game closed. I'm not saying I'd really recommend at the moment, but still an okay B tier option. Alistar and Nautilus, I see a lot of people complain about for being quite low down, and overall these picks just through time have not really been performing that well. A lot of it comes down to the fact that they have been competitively dominant. They haven't been nerfed because of their competitive strengths, but the items which really were holding them up, things like the Warmorgs, the Locket, the Knights, have all lost a substantial amount of power, and I've just dropped them down towards the lower part of the B tier. They're still fine default options if that is what you're very comfortable on, but in the current climate, I'd really recommend some of the other picks over them, primarily because either they're easier to play, have more carry agency, and have like less room for failing, arguably. Pyke is also here. Pyke is a pretty elite skill expressive support. He's also very early game skewed and very snowball. Like all these make him very elite skewed as a champion. In high elo, he definitely like climbs towards the S tier. In low elo, he's just not something I'd really recommend. You can still find these advantages and definitely be a powerful pick within the game. He's obviously going to be more frustrating and not banned considerably more because of his lane strength. That just tends to be how the ban system goes. You see a lot of people just banning champions, which crush them in lane. That's why like things like Draven, for example, support pretty high ban rates. And in his current state, yeah, definitely sits towards the lower part of the B tier. Camille honestly falls in the same boat as being a pretty elite skewed support pick, very predicated on once again snowballing, utilizing Halo Blaze to just output a lot of burst damage. If you fall behind, you'll feel pretty useless within the game. If you're ahead of the curve, you can oftentimes just feel very strong and so single out most targets within the game, be very strong against like the jungler, and yeah, utilize that strength to invade and be very powerful in that regard. Camille, kind of akin to Pyke, obviously very elite skewed. Nico, still a solid B tier option. I know a lot of people play her primarily as a support option over mid in her current state. She's definitely like falling out of popularity in the mid lane and definitely leaning back towards support. And she has a great snare ability, and if you can utilize the W effectively, whether that's to mitigate damage, to like trick opponents, to like fake out ultimates, there's a lot of skill expression to Nico's W, which can definitely be like where a lot of her skill ceiling lies. And honestly, if you're very comfortable playing Nico, you should definitely play it. I really like Nico as a champion. I think there's definitely a lot of power in it. Not something I would hugely recommend if you're not comfortable on this kind of a pick. You do have to put a decent amount of time to really learn her like as a champion. Utilizing her early oppressive laning phase can be really powerful, as well as like Q-E combo can definitely output a huge amount of damage and chunk people down quite aggressively. High midding is completely fallen out of support at this point. There's a chance I just remove him next patch. As he was, I mean, his popularity came from Ash Heimerdinger at 2022 Worlds when that got played in the finals as like one of the strongest like lane pairings. They then ended up nerfing him for support primarily, pushing him more towards his scaling and getting items to really make his turrets a bit stronger. And he kind of just over time has been falling out of support for that reason. Heimerdinger in general is just not a very popular champion, so that doesn't surprise me really. But still sits as like a B tier option. I would argue there's better picks which output more damage and can be more consistent within the game, but yeah, he's still a B tier option. Rakan and Fresh are two of my other B tier picks. In Rakan's case, he traditionally gets paired with Zaya, who's being buffed next patch, so we might see some like resurgence with that, but overall he's just not been doing that well over like this split and last split. He's definitely fallen out of favor. He's doing well at Worlds. In fact, like Rakan at Worlds is one of the like strong picks, or like considered one of the prio picks at Worlds. So, but you can definitely find the angles to really make this champion work. If Poppy's banned, then yeah, you can also really benefit from that. So the skill ceiling is definitely there. Like if you enjoy Rakan, then definitely go and play him. He's just not something I'd really recommend at the moment. In Fresh's case, he's an incredibly high skill ceiling champion. I personally just won't recommend Fresh like ever unless this champion is so unbelievably strong that he can really make up for the fact that there is just so much strength within like utilizing all of his abilities effectively, whether that's like correct lanterning, utilizing hook to just apply so much pressure within laning phase. The cage I do feel like is a lackluster ability, and if they do buff Fresh, which I would like them to, I think Fresh is a very exciting champion within the game, and you know he's got a lot of skill expression to him. I think they should go after the ultimate. I think the ultimate over time has definitely become a lot lackluster. Whether that's increasing the range of it, I think the range is a bit small, but they might just lean more to damage or slow duration. There's different paths they can really take with him, but Fresh, yeah, I think he's fine if you, once again, sink a lot of time into him, but still not something I'm ever going to really recommend. Same goes for Bard. Honestly, I don't really recommend Bard as a champion. I think he's definitely very powerful in lanes which are very reliant or like self-sufficient, and he doesn't really need to be there, so he can go around, collect chimes, and utilize his great base damage to support other lanes. And yeah, if you sink a lot of time into Bard, once again, you'll be rewarded for it. If you don't, not really a champion you're really going to be looking at playing. Seraphine, I think it's a fairly good introductory enchanter mage option. Like if you're looking for something like that, then she's definitely a good go-to. I think there's better options at the moment in your Sorakas, and arguably Sona as like an enchanter can do actually decent amounts of damage. Like I'm not gonna say she doesn't do the same amount of damage, like close to the same amount of damage as Seraphine, but Seraphine can definitely like opt more into that OP option, whereas Sona is kind of prohibited by the fact that she can only really go enchanter. She's still very strong though. Like Seraphine, yeah, still a great pick. Just the W nerfs really took her from like an S tier pick to like a high B tier pick, low A tier pick. You can still find decent success on her though. And then the other champion in the B tier is going to be, well, actually two champions of the B tier are going to be Pantheon, who got buffed this patch. He but the change was enough to kind of like move him back up a tier. He's still very volatile, and you still want to really be ahead of lane, like ahead in lane to really make this champion work. But base damage buff is always very nice for him, as that does make up for when you are not snowballing quite as aggressively as you would like to, and it's obviously going to help into some of the more tankier matchups, which you are oftentimes more primarily going to be playing Pantheon into. Zoe drops down from the A tier to the B tier, obviously with Ludens and Storm Surge being nerfed, she lost some power there, so she does drop down a tier. Moving on to the A tier then, we have Silas. He's a great situational flex support option. You can really like make this champion work quite well here if you're pairing him or like playing him into two champions which have good ultimates to still, and then you can like obviously like a lot of time like retaliate utilizing those ultimates within lane, whether that's something like Leona or Varus. Both these ultimates can be very strong on Silas, and he definitely has a lot of strength when it comes down to that. If you're playing him into lanes where he doesn't have like ult value, then he definitely really diminishes as a pick. So you do have to be kind of careful where you play him, but he can come out early in the draft in some situations, as he can maybe go mid and top, but I wouldn't really recommend it. But yeah, in dire straits, then yeah, you can kind of get away with it as a support option. Soraka and Sona are my two enchanter picks here. In Sona's case, I think this champion over time has gotten a bit worse, not really doing as well at the moment, has dropped from like a pretty standard S tier pick primarily because she's unpopular and pretty unoffensive to be strong in the support role, to more like a low A tier pick. Same goes for Soraka. Soraka in the past obviously used to massively overheal people, which was like a really big strength of the champion, but now she's kind of been reeled back in, and like her strength is a bit more distributed in other things. She just also sits towards the low end of the A tier, but they're still very solid enchanter picks, and if you do need enchanter, these two picks can definitely function quite well for you. Hui is in the A tier at the moment. He will get nerfed. I mean, he's being nerfed in 14.21 as he is like an S tier APC pick and an S tier mid lane pick. He's very much he's very performant in those two roles. And as people have learnt him, he's definitely obviously garnered, whatever the word is, a lot of mastery. And he's really benefited from that. He's going to be nerfed. So Hui, currently in the A tier, will probably drop down to the B tier with the nerfs. Swain and Morgana. Someone was like, why have you put Swain and Morgana in the A tier? That's mainly, I mean, I also don't like these two champions. I'm going to be real with you. I think both these champions have been, like, their kits are really misaligned in a lot of situations. Morgana wants to play like a mage, but then obviously wants to get close to you to really utilize her ultimate, so that can feel quite awkward in situations, and a lot of her power can be gated behind landing the Q, making sure you have spell shield value, which can feel... It can be inconsistent in a lot of situations, but there's no denying the fact that extended combat patterns have really benefited both these champions, which is why I do have them in the A tier at the moment. Swain is being reworked in 14.21, so it'll be interesting to see where this champion lands after that. I do think he will end up being weaker for support, actually, as the changes seem to be more focused around his damage, and his, like, arguably recast of ultimate and consistency, so... he might stay as a solid support option. It'll be interesting to see, but I think they will definitely help mid and bot lane Swain. But yeah, there is a chance support Swain stays strong, so be aware of that. Getting reworked in the next patch. Fiddlesticks is a pretty gimmicky support option, but he's definitely functional here. Like, he is being nerfed in 14.21 primarily because of his stronger strength. Like, people aren't particularly aware of support Fiddlesticks as an option, but there's no denying that he's a decent pick. If you can find those ultimate angles, he, as an individual champion, can completely swing fights, which can be a very valuable aspect to, like, champ select and just drafting it in general. His weakness is going to come down to his laning phase. Like, obviously, he has the harass in the E and Q. They're not quite the same as, like, pre-update, pre-ASU, pre-VGU Fiddlesticks, which had a lot more power in his harass and then less power in his other abilities. But he's still a very solid A-tier option at the moment. Vilcor's pretty solid A-tier artillery mage. Got nerfed with Ludens being hit, but does have fallback options. Unlike Xerath, who doesn't really have fallback options. He technically does, but not to the same extent as Vel'Koz. Like, Xerath was very, very locked to going Ludens and Storm Surge, but he does have, like, options like Blackfire, Leandra. You can opt into these. They're not unviable, but he definitely lost more power than the likes of Vel'Koz with the nerfs to the items this patch. He does drop from the S tier to the A tier. I'm going to add him alongside Vel'Koz. Zac, Galio, Shen, Zac and Galio are my two A tier, two lower A tier tank options, I would say. They're more like mid to low A tier picks. I think both of them still are very good engage tools, and both have lots of value through their flex potential. I just don't think they're quite as valuable as the other two, which I have further up. But yeah, they're both still very solid options at the moment. In Milio's case, he's still a great enchanter. Tends to be a bit more synergy reliant champions, which can really utilize his W, and when rotations of Echoes of Helia can definitely feel a lot better to play with him. And overall, he's in a pretty strong spot at the moment. Zilean, I mean, obviously unpopular, kind of akin to Taric, but still got a decent amount of strength within the kit. Taric, on the other hand, which we'll talk about in a minute, is getting nerfed in 14.21. But Zilean, still a very solid A-tier pick at the moment. Braum, also within the A-tier, once again, comes out primarily as a counter pick into engage options. Don't play him into enchanters. You'll lose a lot of value of the pick, and it can feel quite underwhelming. Utilize him as a counter pick, and he will maintain a lot of value within your arsenal of support champions. Rel and Leona have definitely dropped down a bit with directed nerfs to them, but they're still very solid options. I would say that I would have them over the Nautilus, the Pikes, the Alistars at the moment, as the considered pretty standard meta engage supports. And they see a lot of player worlds, obviously. And Leona, Rel, the two I would recommend as go-to options. Rel's engage is some of the best in the game. And Leona has incredible amounts of CC and single target, targeting capabilities, which can be very valuable, especially when paired with like people who really understand how to utilize like your sunlight rotations and the CC rotations. Lux is still a very good mage as well. Obviously gonna be nerfed by Ludens and Storm Surge being hit, so she does drop down a bit. I'll have her next to the other two mage options here. Still the most popular support in the game at the moment. Still a very solid option. If you can consistently land abilities, snowball, stay advantageous within the game, then this champion can oftentimes just one-shot people or really heavily chunk them, which can be really warping when fighting around objectives and gaining lane control. The other A-tier picks, I think, are a slight tier above at the moment. Shaco, I think, is an incredible support pick. Obviously, he's very, very one-trick dependent. Like, you tend to be a one-trick if you're playing Shaco, so it doesn't really help the average player as much, but I do want people to be aware that Shaco support is very good, and if you do want to put a lot of time into Shaco because you enjoy him as like a AP option, I wouldn't really recommend AD support, AD Shaco support, but it is something you can flex into if you're like a very AP heavy drafted comp. But yeah, AP Shaco support, the control is incredible, the scaling is incredible, has good harass in lane with his E, can definitely single target out champions and often do a lot of damage to them, especially with clone. That can be really valuable. And yeah, he's a great A-tier pick in his current state. LeBlanc, actually, I'm going to have slightly lower down because she did get nerfed by Storm Surge and Ludens being nerfed, but she was a very good support option. I'm pretty sure Nemesis has made people a bit more aware that this pick has been really good for a while as a support option, but has obviously had some of her excess damage trimmed down with a direct nerf to her Q and I believe W at the time, and obviously nerfs towards Storm Surge and Ludens for this patch. The other two picks, which I really like actually, are Shen and Tahm Kench. I think Heartsteel as like a support item you can purchase at the moment, with it being a bit cheaper when compared to like the Mythic option before, combined with the fact that both these champions have really good health ratios within their kit. Yeah, they're really good at the moment. I play Tahm Kench support in houses, where it is one of my go-to, because I tend to play like top support as like my two main roles. I play a lot of Tahm Kench. I really like this champion as an option. It provides a great safety net for your ADC. They can play a lot more aggressive within lane, and you have really self-sufficient damage. Like, you can oftentimes be the difference maker in some of the fights if you pair it alongside like maybe even like a Darksteel purchase as you have Heartsteel, X tank item, then Heartsteel, X tank item, that's Unending Despair, Spirit Visage. Both these items are incredible. Like, if you have a 3-item core of Heartsteel, Spirits, and Unending on either Tahm or Shen, you are basically a raid boss. It's insanely powerful, that 3-item core, so just be like aware of it. Like, you can take resources and be really valuable within the game. Anyway, that's my ramble over. Both these picks really good at the moment. Great tank options, and I think they go quite under the radar in their current states. The S tier. So Poppy has been nerfed. She drops from the S plus to the S tier. She still has decent base damage. Obviously lost some of that through the E this patch, but it still comes from the Q primarily. Like, there is a lot of damage within that ability. The passive nerf also does hurt her. It's going to be some excess HP lost within laning phase. She's just a bit weaker now. She does drop from the S tier to the S plus tier to the S tier. Taric being nerfed next patch, obviously he's very unpopular, but he is very strong at the moment, specifically with like certain pairings like the Nyla, for example. Pre-hotfix nerf, that would have been the strongest thing in the game. After the hotfix nerf, it's still going to be very strong. Like, it's still one of the strongest pairings you can really like have access to. It's just not quite as strong as pre-nerf. So Taric, still a great champion, has great pairings. If you can really utilize him effectively within draft as like a anti-engage option, then you should be good to go with this pick. He's not something you would blind, but yeah, something you can utilize more as a counter pick. Janna, still a great enchanter. You rarely see this champion drop out the S tier. Obviously her playstyle can mainly be attributed to W harass and then self-pill tools, which can be very valuable against a lot of the engage options at the moment. So yeah, very solid S tier pick. Zyra and Brand are my two major options here. Dot major options here. They have some of the best damage over time within the game. It makes them very oppressive within team fights, and yeah, playing around Drake, playing around I want to say Void Mites, Void Grubs, playing around Rift Held, Baron, all of these objectives and just general team fights, they can be so valuable to your draft. They do fall off the higher elo you go. Like, they're not quite as good as the likes of Janna, Taric, Poppy when it comes to being viable in high elo, but they're very good in their current state, especially for mid and low elo. Brander's being nerfed in 14.21, so do be aware of that if you are picking up the champion. I'd recommend Zyra if you're if you're looking to have longevity with the pick, but currently Brand very strong, definitely one of the higher options at the moment. Nami and Lulu are my two enchanter picks. Nami's case, she received a very unnecessary buff not too long ago, which really did help her. It really elevated her back to being a very viable pick. Obviously, the main thing you're going to think of when it comes to Nami are pairings like Lucian and Brand, but she's still very viable with a lot of other options and can be very powerful with like certain jungle pairings where you can really utilize the cycling of E and W, whether that's like to get the bounce going or to chain slow and then utilize the damage added onto that. Can all be very powerful in this pick. And in Luda's case, obviously, she was weak for a while because of the fact that she's very reliant on like pairings to be valuable within draft. Things like Jin and MF are really bad for Lulu. Like, you don't want to really pair Lulu alongside these two picks, but the likes of Jinx, for example, can be really powerful with Lulu. Other hyper carry options, things like Aphelios being a bit better, although you're not really going to see Aphelios in mid elo. That champion's kind of primarily played by OTPs and like high elo. Lulu really benefits from certain pairings. Nami is a bit better generalistic, but obviously it has well-known pairings which you can be viable with. Janna, great as a disengage option. My favourite all-rounder is going to be Senna. Like, Senna still maintains her spot in the S+ tier. The thing you do have to be careful about when playing Senna is hook champions. That is what she's primarily weakened to. Champions which can single target her out, burst her down before she can really utilise her damage output, her burst potential, as she is, not burst, but damage output, healing, and like whether you're going like the Echoes of Helia variant, whether you're going a bit more towards like the Cleaver, the RFC, stuff like that. She has solid build variants at the moment, and depending on what you're going, you can kind of flex your champion that way. The main thing, obviously, if you get single targeted out, you are one of the squishiest champions in the game, so you do just have to be aware of that space effectively, and you are incredibly powerful. She is being nerfed in 14.21, the armor is going down, so you are going to be even more susceptible to being bursted. So just be aware of that. But other than that, she is, definitely one of the premier go-to support picks at the moment. But I feel like the S tier has a good variety as options. 2 enchanters, or 3 enchanters rather, 2 dot mages, Taric, which is a great champion for like anti-engage. And then Poppy, who is a great engage and anti-dash, anti-mobility champion. So there's lots of variety there. Tom and Chen, also, personal recommendations. I really do value these picks quite highly. And those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.